We're wrapping up our message series today called Those People. We've been talking about those people. Now, I want to let you know, if you've missed any of the messages, not just this series, but all the series that we've been through so far, if you've missed any of these messages, you can go to our website, barbertonfcoc.org, click on media, and you'll find most of the messages there on video, and you can watch right there online. Also, we put on, I don't know how many people were here for Virgil's song a couple weeks ago. That's on our website, so you can check that out there. And Mike Dutton's baptism is on there. We're trying to post some of these things that are happening around here so you can celebrate with us in what's going on here at First Church of Christ. So check that out, barbertonfcoc.org. Click on the media section, and you'll find that. So I want to start this morning by asking a question. How many of you know somebody who nitpicks everything? I assume from the laughter that you probably do. You know, we know those people, right? How many of you are sitting? No, don't tell me that. I don't want to know, okay? But we know who those people are. Those people criticize everything and anything that we do. And this isn't a new problem to mankind. You know, this is something that's been going on since the beginning of the world, and I want to share a few Bible references with you. One of them we know of was Moses had married this woman, and guess what? His brother and sister didn't like her. And so they criticized Moses for marrying this woman. They didn't like her, so they told him about it. Oh, man, you know, what are you doing? And maybe you and Moses might have something in common. Maybe you and he married women that your family just didn't like, or you married someone that your family just doesn't like. Okay, in the New Testament, a lot of people criticized Paul for not being an eloquent speaker. Okay, so here's Paul, you know, he goes to all these churches and he speaks at these churches and people are saying, man, this guy, he's not real good, you know, he's not eloquent at what he does. And Paul even gets in on the action and he criticizes himself and he says, you know, I'm not an eloquent speaker, but I preach the gospel. So Paul gets in on the criticisms. Now, how about Jesus? How about Jesus? Jesus was a perfect man. No sin, right? He was without sin, but everywhere he went, people criticized him. They criticized him. The Pharisees, the Roman soldiers, even some of his own followers just picked him apart for hanging out with sinners. They called him a drunkard. They even criticized him for healing people on the Sabbath. And this poor guy, Jesus, he just couldn't do anything right. So you see throughout history, people criticizing people it's not a new issue that we're dealing with. It's been going on from the beginning of time, basically. And the reality is people are going to criticize us. It's just going to happen. We're going to find somebody criticizing. It's just a part of life. Now, I know I'm a magnet for criticism. I kind of make it easy for you guys from time to time, don't I? Yeah. You know, people like to pick me apart. I'm an upfront guy. People know what's going on. So people will criticize me for what I wear to church, how I do my hair, how many times I say the word awesome. I expected laughter there because I say the word awesome a lot. I know I do. I just like that word. How I stick my hand in my pocket while I'm preaching. I do that a lot too. You know, people pick me apart on that. And even the voices that I use in my messages. My wife just a couple weeks ago was criticizing me for the voices I was using in one of my sermons just recently. So I get criticized. I get picked apart. And I just have to recognize that people are going to criticize me. It's a part of life. I don't know who it might be for you, but it could be the friends that you work with or go to school with who make fun of you for being a Christian. It could be family members who criticize the way you're raising your kids. It could be your spouse that nitpicks everything you do apart. It could be other Christians in your life. We know Christians, they don't really like to know. Christians criticize quite a bit, don't they? You know, they can be the most critical, I think, in life. You know, things like, you're just not reading the right Bible translation, dude. What are you thinking? You know? Or, I can't believe you go to that church. You know, they don't take communion every Sunday. Christians don't like to criticize people, do they? Or, oh, did you see that guy? That guy goes to our church. He just walked into that bar. Oh my goodness. Well, better call the Christian police, right? Now, here's kind of a sidebar. I wonder, where would Jesus hang out if he were here today? How many of you think that Jesus would be hanging out with me during the week in my office here at the church building? Anybody really think that? I really doubt that. I oftentimes imagine Jesus, if he were here today, he wouldn't be calling everybody in our church directory and saying, hey, let's get the saints together and have a party. Yeah, no, that's not Jesus. Jesus, you'd probably find him in the local bar or somewhere hanging out with sinners and loving on people and just getting to know people and trying to bring them into his care and his shepherding. And I just picture Jesus that way. Anyway, no wonder he got criticized. People didn't like what he was doing. And the church is the same way. We are so good as Christians at criticizing each other and not really understanding the full thing of what people are doing. Anyway, I digress. On and on the criticisms come. You can't go anywhere without hearing some kind of criticism from somebody. It's very evident. When you hear it from people that you love, how much worse is it for us? How much does it cut our heart out and hurt us from those types of people? So how do we deal with critical people? How do we deal with those criticizers, those people that cut us down every chance we get? Now, before we unpack some teaching on unjust criticism, I want to touch on one thing, and I think it'd be a huge mistake to overlook this. So there is value in constructive criticism. There is value in that because we can learn so much from people in our lives that care about us and want to speak the truth in love. So real quickly, write this down in your notes. You'll find on the back side of your bulletins an outline where you can take notes. But write this down. Never ignore the value of constructive criticism. Never ignore the value of constructive criticism. I like what Solomon writes in Proverbs 15, verses 31 and 32. He writes this: if you listen to constructive criticism, you will be at home among the wise. If you reject criticism, you only harm yourself. But if you listen to correction, you grow in understanding. Now, one of the most valuable things that you can do as a leader, as a parent, as a follower of Jesus, as a student, as an employee in your workplace, is to crave helpful feedback and listen to constructive criticism. Doing so, Solomon says, makes us understanding and wise. You want to get understanding, you want to be wise. Listen to these people that have your best interest at heart. Listen to what they have to say and maybe make some changes based on that, okay? So that's constructive criticism. I just want to hit that real quick. The rest of our time together this morning, I want to look at unjust criticism. The people that cut us down all the time, and it just seems like they just rip us apart every chance they get. How do we deal with those people in our lives? Now, just like every other week in this sermon series, we're going to pray. We're going to ask God to help us, to give us wisdom and understanding, and to lead us to do what's right. Now, what's one of the first things we do when someone criticizes us, or we hear that someone criticizes us? What do we do? Anybody want to take a shot at that one? Criticize them back. What I hear over here? It depends on what they criticize you about. Okay. A lot of times we get defensive, don't we? I mean, what we want to do is when they directly criticize us or we hear about it from somebody else, we get angry. We explode with rage. We might criticize back. Some of us hunt them down so we can give them what for, right? And we're going to get in their faces, and we're just going to solve this right now. Somebody criticizes us. That's what we do. All of these things that we do typically we call reacting. We react to unjust criticism. That's typically what we do. Someone says something about us, we get upset and we react. How many of you are on Facebook or Twitter? Some of you know where I'm going with this. This is great. Aren't those social media sites the best? Huh? Think about it, Somebody criticizes you or they say something about you, and what do? Oh, man. You can hear the keyboard's like hot with fire because you can't type fast enough about what you're going to say on Facebook, This is great. You can draw out a whole long paragraph, sometimes a whole long story, and then what do? Pip, there's my status update. And that's what we do. We take our criticisms and stuff like that, and we go to social media, and, we give them what for on there, and pretty soon our friends get in on it, like, yeah, dude, I'm with you, and things like that. And pretty soon, everybody's against this one person unfriends you, and, what do you do about that? So anyway, so social media is an outlet sometimes for our reactions to criticism, unjust criticism. Maybe we should be wiser than to just react. Maybe we should be wiser than to just react to criticism. Maybe as followers of Jesus, we don't try to solve our private problems in public forums. Okay? So we react. In Judges chapter 7 and 8, if you want to turn there in your Bibles right now, that's where we're going to spend the rest of our time together this morning. Judges chapter 7 and chapter 8, we find Gideon. Gideon has just gotten his army together, 300 men. They're out there fighting the Midianites, and they're in the middle of this battle, and a situation comes up. Gideon had not invited every tribe of Israel to come and fight in this battle, okay? And so in the middle of the battle, Gideon finally calls on the tribe of Ephraim. They hadn't been invited previously. He calls the tribe of Ephraim. He says, I need your help. I need you to go ahead of me in the battle, fight these guys, get these two evil, wicked kings, Oreb and Zeb, and see if you can get them. And so Gideon calls them in the middle of the battle so he can gain victory. Now, to kind of put this in human terms, since we're not living in biblical times, imagine yourself, you are a football player, okay? You're a pretty good football player. And typically when people get together, they think of you and they, oh, yeah, this woman, they play really good football. So imagine your friends at the beginning of a football season, they're in some kind of league or something. They decide to get a team together, but they don't call you to play on their team. In fact, nobody calls you to play on their team. So here you are, you're not playing football, all of your friends are out there, and they're defeating all these teams. They win every week, every time they go to play football. They're winning, and it's great. Until one day, as the team captain looks ahead to another game, he thinks, oh man, I don't know if we're going to win this game. We better call you. You've got the talent. You've got the ability to play football. So they call you up. What's your reaction going to be? What? You didn't invite me in the beginning. Why am I going to play for you now? This is crazy. And that's how the Ephraimites felt here. They were not called to go into the battle until the middle of the battle. They've got the ability to go out and win this war, win this battle, and they could have sat back and said, I'm not going out there. You didn't call me from the beginning. Why do you need me now? And that would be our reaction, I would think. So our feelings would be hurt that our friends didn't invite us to play in the first place, and that's how the Ephraimites felt. They felt slighted because they weren't called up until the middle of the battle. And it didn't matter to them that they went out and defeated these Midianites decisively, okay? Look at their reaction in Judges chapter 8, verse 1. It says, now the Ephraimites asked Gideon, why have you treated us like this? Why didn't you call us when you went out to fight Midian? Basically, why didn't you call us in the first place? When you went out and fight these guys, we should have been invited from the very beginning. And they did what? Yeah, some of your translations say chastised. This one says criticized. They criticized Gideon sharply. They came down hard on Gideon because of his decisions in the middle of battle. So these guys are upset at what Gideon did to them. They criticize him sharply. Now Gideon, at this point, I think has a choice. He could go on Facebook. Oh, wait a minute. They didn't have Facebook back then. He could go into the caves and start writing on the walls about how bad these guys are. We'll call it Cave Book, right? So everybody can see it. That was their social media, okay? Yeah, these guys. Anyway, he could do, he could go out, he could react in some way and get angry. He could go out and hunt them down and kick some butt because these guys are just acting unreasonable. But Gideon doesn't react. He doesn't react in this situation. Look what he does in verse 2. But he answered them, "What have I accomplished compared to you? Aren't the gleanings of Ephraim's grapes better than the full grape harvest of Abiezer? God gave Oreb and Zeb, the Midianite leaders, into your hands. What was I able to do compared to you?" And I like this. At this, their resentment against him subsided, went away. Instead of reacting out of anger, irrational thought, behavior, instead of reacting at the Ephraimites' criticisms, Gideon responds. There is a difference. Gideon responds to them. And that's the first prayer we're going to pray when we hear unjust criticism come our way. We're going to pray to God, help me know when to respond to unjust criticism. Not react. Reacting is the bad part. We're not going to go out, we're not going to post on Facebook how terrible these people are. We're not going to go hunt them down and take names and whatever. We're going to respond. And we need God's help to let us know when. When should I respond to unjust criticism? Gideon simply gave the Midianites the facts. Let me lay it out for you. Here's the deal. He told them that they were better than him in this whole ordeal. And God helped them to deliver these two wicked guys, these two evil guys called Oreb and Zeb, right into their hands. The Ephraimites took them by power and they won. Gideon gave them the facts and their resentment against him subsided. You see, the Ephraimites didn't have all the information. How often do we not have all the information of what's going on in a situation and we react? We call meetings. We get mad at somebody. We post it on Facebook. And we just react without finding out all the details of what's going on in a situation. So we need to pray to God, how do I respond to unjust criticism? God, help me to know when to respond. There will be times to respond to criticism, there's no doubt. There are some criticisms, though, that we need to just shake off. Realize we can't control it, we can't respond to it. But there are times when an explanation could bring understanding to the situation and could help anger and fear and whatever subside because of that and diffuse that unjust criticism. God, help me know when to respond to unjust criticism. Let me give you the second prayer, and it's this. God, help me to know when to dismiss invalid criticism. Help me to know when to just shake it off, not worry about it. It's invalid. It doesn't matter, okay? Help me to know when to dismiss invalid criticism. Help me to know when to dismiss something that's not accurate. I want to give you a little rule of thumb here, okay? If a large amount of people, let's say a dozen or so, I'm just kind of throwing that number out there. If a large amount of people are coming to you, and they're coming at you at different angles, and they're all saying the same thing, chances are that's probably constructive criticism. Makes sense. Or if they're a professional in that field of which they're coming to you about, chances are that's probably that's justified criticism. That's constructive criticism. You should probably listen to that. However, if only one or two people come to you over and over again, and they don't know you real well, maybe they don't understand the whole context of your life and who you are, or you've got one hypercritical, negative person, somebody hasn't said anything positive since like the 1970s, chances are that's invalid criticism, and that may be a time to just dismiss it, okay? In fact, Jesus did this. in the New Testament. This is kind of neat. Peter records this in 1 Peter. Peter describes Jesus' dismissal of invalid criticism by the soldiers and the haters at the time of his beatings and execution. Check this out. 1 Peter 2:23 says this, when they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. Oh, how easy is it for us sometimes? Somebody insults us. Dude, I'm going after them. Not Jesus. Jesus doesn't retaliate. And when he suffered, he made no threats. He made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. God says, vengeance is mine. I will repay. It's not up to us. It's not up to us to repay somebody who's talked about us or said something bad about us or criticized us unjustly. We leave it up to God. We let him handle it and sort it out and deal with it. All right? If you're going to make a difference in this life, I promise you, criticisms are going to come your way. People will talk about you. The more effective you are, the better you are at your work, the more of a leader you are at your school, the more impactful you are for the kingdom of God, the more effective your ministry becomes, the more critics you're going to pick up along the way. It's the nature of the beast. It's what happens. That's what happens. You have to learn to dismiss it, to shake it off, to rise above invalid criticism. And that takes time. It takes practice to get through that. Because at first, when you start to make some waves, and what you're doing in life, and people start to criticize you, at first you take it personally. Why? Why do we do that? Why do we take it so personally? A lot of times, we elevate the opinions of people above the opinions of God. We rather hear what people say about us and take it to heart rather than know what God has to say about us. We think things like, do they like me? I don't know. What do they think about me? They don't understand who I am. I want them to like me. And so at the beginning of all this, we take it very personally. Everybody's not going to like you. You're not going to please everybody. Trust me, I know. The good news is that you can please God. Instead of living for the crowd that you can't please, you can live for an audience of one who you can please. And you're shaken free of that desire to have everybody like you. When you get that in your mind, it sets you free of being a prisoner of the opinions of people. And you can rise above it. You can rise above it. If you're very sensitive to criticism, again, you're elevating the opinions of people above the opinions of God. And the problem is that as you become obsessed with what people think about you, the quicker you forget what God thinks about you. Can I say that again? Catch this. Becoming obsessed with what people think about you is the quickest way to forget what God thinks about you. Who's more important? If you're a follower of Jesus, the good news is you don't have to live for the approval of all these people on earth. The only person that you can begin living for the approval of God, and I can guarantee you that God is going to have a whole lot more mercy than all these yahoos that live here on earth anyway. He really does. He loves us. He forgives us. I don't know that people forgive very well. God does. Who are you living for? Let me give you the most important prayer regarding critical people. Here it goes. Ready? God, help me overcome my own critical nature. You knew that was coming, right? Why? Because we're all one of what? Thank you. We're all one of what? Those people. We're all one of those people at one time or another, aren't we? I mean, we fall right into the trap. Satan's after us. He wants us to mess up. And so we get caught up in being one of those people. Proverbs 12:18 says, some people make cutting remarks. Been there. But the words of the wise bring healing. I don't know about you, but I can be pretty critical of things. Time to be transparent. Of the four those people messages we've talked about, I think this one probably hits me the hardest. I can be so critical. I really can. It's tough not to be. I criticize music. I criticize the way people spend their money. I criticize the way people dress. Imagine that. I criticize. Thought I'd get a laughter out of that. I criticize how people drive. And that's probably the biggest one. If you ever ride with me, you'll know my wife is on me all the time. Can't you just shut up? I do, though. I criticize the way people drive. I criticize the way people talk, and on and on and on. And I don't know what it is. But I drive by people on Sunday mornings, on Sunday mornings, and they're all busy with other things going on. They're out walking their dogs. They're out doing yard work or shoveling snow or whatever. They're out getting their Akron Beacon Journal in their pajamas. What? And the whole time I'm criticizing them. And I'm on my way to church to worship God and save people. What? Something's wrong with this picture. What is going on, I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, what a bunch of ungodly people out there. I can't believe this. Why can't they get their butts in church? They're all going to hell, And I'm criticizing them. And I'm coming to church to worship. But I wonder, being a critical person, does it reveal really the weakness and the sin and the pride in my own heart? I'm better than them. I'm going to church. And so, the more critical I am, the smaller a person I become. I just get smaller and smaller until I'm really tiny. Because my own pride says I'm right and everybody else is wrong. I'm prideful. And so that makes them a bigger person than me. So what do I got to do? I got to tear them down some more. Because they're bigger than me. Why do we do this? Why do we do this? Why is it so easy for us to criticize people and all this stuff around us? I think it simply represents the ungodliness and the sin and the pride and the insecurity in my own heart. But if I could spend time getting closer to God, then I get to know who I am in Jesus, then I think the less need I'll have to tear other people down. The closer I get to God, the more I find out who I am in Jesus Christ, a saved and sanctified sinner, the less need I'll have to tear people down. I want to love people up. I don't want to tear them down. I want to love people up. I want my words to be wise, like Solomon said in that verse. I want my words to bring healing. To bring healing. Criticism never changed the world. Never changed the world. We're not going to criticize our way to a better marriage. Am I right? We're not going to criticize our children into becoming godlier. We're not going to criticize fellow Christians into a deeper relationship with God. We can continue to spew the venom and the poison in people's lives, but criticism will never change the world. It's not going to happen. What we can do in life, though, is to find some things to celebrate, to enjoy. We could take some time to see the good in the people around us. It's hard for me. I see good all around me, but for some reason, my critical spirit wants to come out. But what if we really, the song, count your blessings? What if we did that with other people? Count the blessings those people bring into your life. We could take some time to see good in our workplace, and we can focus on the good and love people up. And that's the challenge, I think, for all of us today. That's the challenge. Write this down. Focus on the good and love people up. I know I didn't put it in your notes. There's no blanks to put in, but think about that. Focus on the good. Focus on the good and love people up. That's what it's about. All of us are those people at one time or another. Our goal is not to be one of those people, right? Whether to become overly needy, manipulative, hypocrites, or criticizers. Our goal is not to become one of those people. Our goal is to become one of God's people. To live for Him, to realize who we are in Him, so that we can make a difference in this world. All right, so here's what we're going to pray. God, help us to know when to respond to unjust criticism. Help us to know when to dismiss invalid criticism, and help us to overcome our own critical hearts and to focus on the good and love people up.